You have known Sid Luckman for a good long time. How did you first get to know him?
I've known Sid Luckman for 57 years, since he came to Chicago in 1939. When George Halas managed to get Luckman and persuade him to come to Chicago, Sid was a little reluctant because he'd never been west of the Hudson River. And Halas said that Luckman believes we're all Indians out here, so when he comes to Chicago, I wish you would get to know him and take him around town and introduce him to your friends and let him be known very well, because he's a very charming guy and very lovable. He really is a lovable guy. But that was 57 years ago when he came to the Bears in 1957.
You were a sports
1 second, have I got the right year?
I think you said 57, it's 37, wasn't it?
1937. In 1937, when he came to the Bears.
You were a sports writer then?
I was a sports writer at that time and spending a lot of time covering the Bears, and actually I had a close relationship with Mr. Halas, and Mr. Halas called on various friends, not only me, but to meet Sid, because he sensed that Sid's going to be a big star. He had a feeling that Sid was just the ideal man to play the new position of quarterback in the T formation. And Sid was the originally great T formation quarterback. He set the pattern for all the other T formation quarterbacks that came along that followed in his footsteps. He was a master on the field. He was almost like a coach on the field. He knew the plays, everybody's plays, everybody's signals, and he was the closest thing to having a coach on the field with you.
What set him apart as a quarterback?
Well, I say first, intelligence. He was a great scholar of football. He knew everything to be known about the game, and he learned everything about the T formation, which was a very intricate process at that time. It was the first time it was being used. And he became not only a great exponent of the T formation, but he was an expert in handling the ball, passing it off, throwing footballs, throwing passes, handing the ball off, which is part of the T formation. And he just was very, very adept at football. He had a great training under a great coach at Columbia named Lou Little, who was one of the all-time great coaches in college football. And Sid was his prized pupil.
Let's talk a little bit about the Bears team that he came to play for. You had George Halas started the Bears. You had some great people like Bronco Nagurski. You had Red Grange, great players in there. He was starting a dynasty here, and I imagine that when he brought Mr. Luckman on, he really had an eye toward the future, what was possible here.
He had an eye toward the future about the T formation and how it could expand and be used so efficiently by players like Sid Luckman. There weren't too many quarterbacks who could handle that position at that time. There was a different position completely, and Sid was the master of it. And Mr. Halas did have a vision of a dynasty, and he did put some great ball players together. Bronco, you mentioned, and Red Grange, of course, but there were so many others, you know. Ray Nolte, who I call Jolting Nolting, and I'm sorry I can't remember the names offhand, but they were a great aggregation under great coaching. Halas was a great coach and a great innovator.
Well, tell me about Halas, the coach. What set him apart?
Halas was so determined and so football wise that even though there was a shortage of money at that time, he may have been the poorest of the owners at that time, even though there were only a few owners in these early years. But he was a very, very bright man who had a great idea about the future of football, much more hopeful than many other people about professional football at that time. And George went to great success. He was the one who really made professional football what it became. He very seldom got credit for that, but he was the one who really did it. And I think professional football owes him a lot, and he's been recognized. I think he's well recognized for what he accomplished.
Exactly. He kind of had the. You made. Can you sit up a little? Okay. You made a really good point there. He saw the potential for what pro football could become.
Yes.
And he really made it happen. What were the qualities Halas brought to that in making that happen?
Well, he brought his own determination. He was a very determined man and a very successful man, and he was a great football scholar. And he had visions of football being much more popular than it was in those days when he first helped launch the National Football League. He foresaw that there would be days when there would be big crowds coming out to see professional football. And he always quoted the words of Bob Zuppke, the great coach at the University of Illinois. And Zuppke said that just when my players learn to really play football, they graduate and disappear. And that gave Halas an idea. He said, why should they disappear? Let's start a professional league after they get out of college. And that was the blossoming of the Chicago Bears' greatness, when he grabbed all these great college players, turned them into Chicago Bears, and in turn turned them into one of the most dynamic franchises in the National Football League.
Well, one of the keys to that was Sid Luckman.
Absolutely. Sid Luckman, Bronco Nagurski, Red Grange, people of that nature. These were the name players, but the other players who were not quite as well known were equally great. They were tremendous football players in those days, and they came out of colleges and they played good football in college. There wasn't too much difference going into the pro league, and he had a lineup of talent that was unapproachable.
In the 1940s, 4 championships in 7 years. Sid Luckman was quarterback at that time. That's a fantastic accomplishment. How did they do it?
They did it because, first of all, the T formation. Yeah. Second of all, Luckman. Yeah. Third of all the other great players that Halas had compiled. And then they had a great coaching staff headed by George Halas. And Clark Shaughnessy had been at the University of Chicago. He came over and helped develop the T formation. And it's very significant when we talk about the T formation that in the year 1940, I think, the Bears played the Washington Redskins for the championship, beat them 73-0, an unheard of score, the most explosive offensive demonstration I've ever seen. At the same time, Stanford, coached by Clark Shaughnessy, also a T formation team, defeated Nebraska in the Rose Bowl game. Now these 2 victories, the Bears over Washington and Stanford over Nebraska, changed the whole face of football. Every team thereafter, from high school to college to pro, adopted the T formation because of his explosive and quick striking ability. It was almost impossible to stop if you didn't have a damn good defense. And so that changed the face of football. And the T formation, which you now see, is played by everybody. In the old days when I was first playing football, we had a single wing, we had a double wing, we had a short punt formation, and various formations of that nature. Today, every team looks the same, plays the same, uses the same plays, but they do it a lot better, much more efficiently, and with greater talent.
Now, you said a little bit earlier that it took a quarterback with real intelligence and a real strategic view of the game to make the T formation work. How did Luckman do that?
He did that because he was a great scholar, a great student of football. And your T formation quarterback has to be very adroit, very nifty on his feet. He gets the ball from the center. He's got to make a quick pass off to a halfback coming in. He's got to make a fake and drop back and throw a pass. He has to fake and run with the ball. There are many options that the quarterback has, all in part of the T formation. And Sid handled everything beautifully. He turned out to be a very fine runner, as he had been in college. But now he was even better. He was stronger and bigger. And he had the passing threat to go with it, which made his running more effective. And he became a great passer, led the league in passing, had, as you pointed out before, led the Bears to 4 championships. You know, those days the Bears were completely supreme in professional football.
There was a letter from George Halas to Sid Luckman about how proud he was of him, as proud as a son, really. And he said he's probably the best quarterback that ever lived. Does that sound like quite a recommendation for him?
It was not only a recommendation, it was the truth at that time, that Sid Luckman was without a doubt the best quarterback up to that point. There have been so many great quarterbacks following in his footsteps, and the game has changed. So today the quarterbacks throw 40 or 50 passes in the game. In Sid Luckman's day, they threw 15 or 20 passes at the most. It was basically a running game, and the T formation was so effective because it could strike so quickly, and the running game was tremendous. And then there was the added element of the surprise pass. But there wasn't much passing compared to today. In Sid's day, and if he threw 15 or 20 passes in the game, that was considered an awful lot. Today they throw 30, 40, 50.
What about the, let's talk a little bit about Sid Luckman, the man. We've talked about the athlete and how good he was there. I barely know him. I've just talked to him a few times, but he comes to me.
That's enough. If you talk to him a few times, that's enough.
Okay. He's a person of great personal warmth and charm. Can you talk about how he is to have as a friend?
Oh, he's a tremendous friend, a tremendous motivator himself. He's a great speech maker. Sid can get up and overwhelm an audience with his conversation and his speeches. He also is a great friend. He'll go to any length to help a friend. He's done that for me. He's done that for others. And when he's involved, he's really involved. He doesn't play tootsie or footsie with anybody. He really goes all out for his efforts. And he brought his great charm and his great success in football into the business world and became very, very successful as a millionaire businessman, and stayed in Chicago, which was very nice. We'd like to see the athletes who make their names here stay here, and we capitalize on those names. And Sid did. He became a very, very successful entrepreneur and an owner, a part owner of a very large company, which he helped develop and improve. And he has friends all over the country. No matter where you go, people know Sid Luckman, if not personally, by reputation. It's remarkable how his name, even though he hasn't played in many, many years, his name is still regarded as one of the best-known names in football. And I can say that as a friend, he also has that same caliber.
Hold on just here. Ties wandered just a little bit. Okay. Okay. Well, you know, you mentioned something there that I think is very good. You're talking about how he came to Chicago, not only worked here, but he stayed here and had a real commitment to the city. He still keeps a home here in retirement, and he's been honored by, oh goodness, all sorts of organizations like the Boys Club, people like
You
that.
can't name an organization in Chicago that hasn't honored Sid Luckman or used him to raise funds. We call ourselves the Pigeons. We're used to raise funds for other organizations.
That's a whole other side of this gentleman. Could you tell me about his generosity of spirit when it comes to helping other people?
Well, as great a quarterback as he had been, that's how generous he is with his support and his money. He's a tremendous, tremendous factor in the city of Chicago and among his friends. And Essie, my wife, and I, and Sid and his late wife, we lived together practically. We're friends all those years. We lived through the agony and ecstasy of life and death in our families. And we've been very close, very close.
The room service is here. Yeah. Okay, rolling. All right. Well, as you know, we are starting to get to the end of our time here. Anything that you'd like to say, Cup, in terms of just kind of summing up about this gentleman?
I think I've touched on the highlights of Sid Luckman's career, which has been a phenomenal one. But as a person, he also stands as unique. He has more friends, and justifiably so. When he's a friend, he's a real friend. He goes all out. And he has been tremendously successful in business, which compiled more friendships for him. And wherever you go, Sid Luckman is still the legend of professional football because he set the pattern for so many other quarterbacks that followed in his path. The quarterbacks today have it a lot easier. The game is more developed more. So the quarterbacks today have a little bit easier job than Sid did in developing it originally. But he certainly established the way the position should be played And it hasn't changed much as far as that's concerned. He still played almost the same way, but with a lot of refinements that have come into professional football.
One of the true greats. No question.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about Sid is when they talk about salaries today, and they're so tremendous that it's almost impossible to reconcile this with reality. Sid's top salary was only $17,500 a year. And Mr. Halas gave him that only when he found out that Sammy Baugh of the Washington Redskins was making that much money. And Mr. Halas said, no quarterback is going to be paid more than our Sid Luckman. So that's how he got $17,500. But before that, the money was very, very meager, comparatively speaking.
No doubt. One other thing I wanted to ask, because like I said earlier, I'm going to see Virginia Marmaduk on Friday.
Yes.
She's going to be 88 years old on the 21st. Why don't you tell her happy birthday?
Virginia Marmaduk, in my memory, and I've known her for so many years, one of the great reporters of all time. She was one of the first of the female reporters to match up with the best of the males, and she broke a lot of ground that way. She was wonderful. And the fact that she's 88 years old indicates that she, to me, she has not lost her enthusiasm. She's one of the most enthusiastic persons I know and I love, and we've been friends for so many years. We worked on the same papers, so forth. But she is a remarkable person, and I think Southern Illinois U is very fortunate to have a person of that caliber on its side.
We sure feel the same way.
Happy birthday, Virginia, the Duchess, as we called her.
Perfect. Thank you. I really